Hey everyone, thanks for clicking on the video today. For those of you who don't know, I've had quite the journey with my coding bootcamp experience. I've been trying to evaluate next steps after things have fallen apart with General Assembly, and I've had the fortunate upside in this particularly unfortunate situation to have people reaching out to me to give me advice on what next steps should be. One person who reached out is Benjamin Van Nguyen, who I interviewed previously about his move into tech from being a medical school dropout to being a software engineer in just a matter of months. Benji started a multi-year career that he is currently very successful in. He's now a director of engineering at a large fintech firm and has clearly a broad horizon in front of him in terms of opportunity. He was kind enough to sit down and talk with me about potential next steps for people whose bootcamp experiences haven't worked out in general, and then for me more specifically. He also talks about specific tactics and strategies to stand out in a massive sea of junior developers and in the highly competitive market that we have found ourselves in. It's worth a listen, so get the popcorn going. And if you don't stay for the whole thing, I totally get it. I would suggest you at least hop into about the 30-minute mark for more specific tactics on getting into the workforce in this particular market. Thanks again for coming on, Benji. This should help a ton of people. So without further ado, I give you Benjamin Van Nguyen. Hey, Benji, thanks for coming on again.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
So people who saw our last video together, I think it was maybe 2.5 months ago. First off, if you haven't seen it, I would go watch it. I highly recommend it. It's about Benjamin's story of getting into becoming a developer. For those who did not watch that video, could you please give us a quick introduction, background on who you are and where you came from?
Yeah, so my name is Benjamin. I usually go by Benji. I am currently a director of engineering at a fintech startup. I had been programming since November 18th of 2018. I completely self-taught. I decided to not go the bootcamp route because of, for primarily financial reasons, but also I knew that I was generally a good self-studier. So yeah, November 18th, 2018 was when I started programming. I self-studied for about 5 or 6 months before landing my first internship in May of 2019. I was an engineer for 2 years before I became a tech lead, which still involved a lot of coding. So I still, was engineering quite a bit. And then for my fourth year at that same company, I became a director of engineering, and here I am.
Very cool. Did you have a background in finance when you got into coding, or did you
No,
make
no, no.
that?
It was
Cool.
medical school. Yeah. My
Right.
medicine is my background. Yeah. 2018 was also when I dropped medical school. Forgot to mention that.
Very cool. Okay.
Mhm.
So I know that you at least casually keep up with my channel, so you're aware of my predicament. I've things went south at General Assembly, and I'm currently a learner without a formal learning environment. So I think this is based on the fact that a lot of people that were involved in this situation with me can't even talk about it. I think that there are more people than you would suspect in similar situations. So my first question is, and in order to answer this properly, you would need to do a proper skill evaluation. So I don't expect a prescriptive answer, but what would you generally advise to somebody in my position to do moving forward after something like this happens?
Yeah. So, I mean, first and foremost, yeah, I did follow your journey through General Assembly, and we can talk about it, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Great.
yeah. It's
Yeah,
a, it's an
sorry, all
expensive permission that I've retained. So
yeah, and good on you for doing that. But yeah, I followed you throughout your journey with General Assembly, and it's just I don't know. It sucks that you ended up becoming, I guess, one of the statistics, you and your cohort, in terms of just, these nightmare scenarios for people who decide to go to boot camp. So,
right.
yeah, I reached out to you and I wanted to kind of get a finger on your situation and see if I could help in any way. But yeah, to answer your question about what people in your position I think should be doing or can be doing is first and foremost, like I'm sure you guys dissolved pretty late into the cohort, right? You guys got pretty far into your learnings. You had told me, I guess, a little prior that you were pretty experienced with the MERN stack. So it sounds like you're at least you've acquired proficiency in like a solid technology stack, right? That's where you currently are.
Correct. I would say that I have some more. I definitely have more work to put in on the React and Node.js side of things. I would say I have a relatively strong understanding of like the big three fundamentals. Um, but I wouldn't necessarily say I'm 100% there in terms of like my React skill set and Node skill set. But that is what I'm approximating over the next couple of months.
Cool. So I guess my prescription would be this then, for someone who's in your shoes, for someone who made it, let's say 50% through to the boot camp, and then their situation just collapsed or their cohort dissolved for whatever reason. You have two choices in front of you. I believe you mentioned in one of your in your most recent video for GA, you were offered a discounted price for going into another cohort, doing another session with the boot camp. So it was either that or going down the self-taught route. But you expressed some concerns about, not having someone to help answer your questions, not being in that sort of environment where you have peers to help aid your learning. And, I think you painted that reality quite clearly. I think that is exactly what anyone in your position has to decide. Do I go down that boot camp route again? Do I continue my studies as a self teacher, or should I just apply to jobs? Chances are you're not ready to apply to jobs. But here's what I would say that you should probably, again, I'm self-taught. I'm biased towards the self-taught route. So my advice is a little biased, of course. I think you have solid fundamentals now under your belt. You have a programming language that you're proficient with. You have everything that you need in order to, I guess, acquire the rest of the things on your own in order to be employable. And yes, if you're the type of person who benefits from learning in the classroom, at some point, once you're thrust into the world of software engineering, you're going to have none of that. You experience it once, and then you're going to be thrust into the workplace. No one's going to hold your hand. Yes, you'll occasionally get some time with your senior engineers, but if you get a job that uses technologies that you have no familiarity with, or it's in a business domain that you have no experience with, you're going to have to learn everything pretty much on your own. So you've already had the period where you've already had that classroom setting. It didn't end exactly the way you wanted it to, of course, but at least now you've gotten over the hurdle of just learning your first programming language, learning control flow, learning the absolute basics. And now you're going to have to do what every engineer does, which is learn the rest on your own. And that's what you do every single day on the job. You're going to be learning everything on your own. No teachers, no peers. I mean, yeah, you'll have an engineer next to you every now and then that you can ping on Slack or just tap on the shoulder. But by and large, you're going to be considerate of their time. They're not going to dedicate themselves to you at the capacity of a full-time teacher. So you have it in you, I think, to, I guess, save some money and save yourself from a potentially another nightmare experience and do some self-learning, because at some point in your career, very early on, once you get your first job, that's exactly what you're going to have to do. So again, that's my bias. I think that people in your position, you guys now have the faculties to take your learnings to the finish line and then start applying for jobs. So that's what I would prescribe.
Yeah, interesting. That makes a lot of sense. I actually hadn't considered that. I mean, kind of biting the bullet now and continuing on with the self-taught route is sort of paying up front instead of paying for like a knowledge debt later on down the road at that first position. So yeah, that's really beneficial thing to keep in mind. Um, being somebody who's taking the self-taught route, I think honestly, I think you just explained one of the main benefits of going the self-taught route. Is there anything else that you could think of in terms of like I'm trying to see I'm trying to see the good in this to the extent that I can. Would you say that there's other benefits or advantages that I have, assuming that I have chosen not to go the boot camp route? What in your estimation are the other benefits of going self-taught?
I don't know if there's any inherent benefits tied with being self-taught. I do think it's generally impressive when I meet other people who are self-taught, who have become those sort of staff engineer wizards. It's just, I don't know. It says a lot about a person generally, the fact that they are disciplined to the point where they can learn a lot, but that really doesn't mean much. It's just like a quick, oh, that's very impressive. Some other, I guess, some other advantages, I guess, that is conferred to the individual is you just become very self-reliant, I suppose. But I do know a lot of people who went to boot camp because they thought that that was just the path that they should be taking. Who are those types who are very self-reliant? I find types to be, some folks are very self-reliant. They're not the types to answer questions. They're kind of just in the boot camp just for the sake of being in a boot camp. They just have that general framework of things that they should be learning, and they do most of the learnings on their own. But I've also met the sort of people who are from boot camps who might not who aren't from boot camps who are very reliant on, I guess, in extrinsic factors to guide their learnings. They need that mentor, they need that senior engineer, or they need a job, I guess, to tell them what they should be learning. Whereas I think having a bit of both is always good. Having intrinsic motivation to chase your own interest organically will help you a lot, I think. And that's where most of your learning is going to be coming from, because you can only learn so much, I guess, when you're focused on building. Rarely would you ever take a step back to kind of go back to the fundamentals and learn something new or chase your own interests, because you're just kind of building things that are set out for you already. So, I mean, like I said, I don't think that there's a lot of inherent benefits to taking the self-taught route. It's more a matter of personality. Are you the type to I guess be self-reliant and answer your own questions, or is your instinct to ask others? Neither is right or wrong, but I do think in this field generally it is a tad more beneficial to have the instinct where it's like, I'm gonna seek out the answers to my own questions first before I bother the guy next to me.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I think a little bit more soul searching is probably in order for me, but in my estimation, just based off of what I know about myself, I would say I'm a pretty even split between the two. So it sounds like I'm not completely screwed going the self-taught route. So that's good news, I suppose. Um,
Yeah, you
you know,
definitely don't want to be too much one or the other. There's some disadvantages, of course, of being too extrinsically motivated versus too intrinsically motivated. If you're too extrinsically motivated and you're really relying on the outside world to guide your growth and your learning, then then you're limited by the fact that you can only learn and get good at what your company is feeding to you. And then if you find a new job, it's like you got to start all over again. You got to learn a new technology stack. You got to learn this new domain. And yeah, you're kind of at a standstill in the off hours. But if you're too intrinsically motivated, then unfortunately you're going to want to do everything on your own, and you're not going to learn from the wisdom of all of the people who before you, I guess, came up with a better solution, if that makes sense.
yes. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Um, I would like to, if you'd be willing. Last time that we spoke, we talked a little bit about your uh, self-taught journey. I believe you learned Python as a first coding language.
Mhm.
Is that okay? Um, but we didn't really get too much into the nitty-gritty details of what you studied from kind of a higher level. So I think this is one place where I'm kind of just jumbled essentially. There's a lot of noise in especially within the coding education industry of you know um do this tutorial or just build projects or quadruple down on leak code questions and learn DSA. What did that learning balance look like for you, learning syntax versus frameworks, computer science, DSA? How did all those things balance out for you? And would you recommend that balance to other people who are currently learning, agnostic of coding language?
Yeah, so it's not, for me at least, it's in the early stages, it's not so much a question of balance. You have to determine on a rigorous order of operations. The first thing you should do literally is just the syntax. Learn the syntax, learn control flow,
Right.
if else, defining a function. If you're learning an object-oriented programming language, learn about classes, learn about the language first and foremost. You're not going to need every single feature that a programming language offers you. Like, for example, I mean, you don't have to learn about classes in Python if you're just strictly the type of person who likes to do functional stuff. You can avoid classes if you want, but by and large, just be proficient at a language. That's the first thing you should do. Step number two, again, this is catered towards people who are first starting off. You have to learn your data structures and algorithms. You have to. I think there is this very pervasive sentiment that a lot of people who first get their jobs will start telling other juniors who are looking for jobs. They'll tell them, oh, I never actually use data structures and algorithms on the job. It's not that important. You just use it for the interview, then you forget about it. But I do think that's naive and short-sighted, because you don't know what's helpful unless you know it. If your worldview is limited only to let's say arrays, this is a very contrived example, but if your worldview is limited to, I guess, oh, okay, let's do this. If your worldview is limited to just recursive algorithms and you solve every single problem recursively, then you might not be able to see that in certain situations, the recursive algorithm is the slower one. It's less memory efficient. You should go for the iterative approach. You're not going to know that unless you're aware of it. So you're going to be limited in the amount of angles at which you can approach a problem unless you have, I guess, a familiarity with those data structures and those algorithms with which to frame those problems, right? Just knowing those things allows you to approach problems from many different angles, and you can come up with a better solution, and you won't accrue tech debt. But people who are very limited in their DSNAs will solve the problem the only way that they know how to do it. They'll give themselves a pat on the back, and they'll move on with their lives. But little do they know they could be accruing tech debt. Little do they know, I think they are stunting themselves a little bit in terms of their learning. Yes, if you're chugging React components, right, for your job as a junior developer, you don't want to be chugging React components the rest of your life, because chugging React components is one of those things that Chat GPT can easily do as well. So where does that put you? Well, if you want to be a software engineer worth your salt, if you want to solve rigorous programming problems, the types of problems that React is built upon, and you want to grow to be the sort of engineer that solves rigorous problems, you do need to not, I guess, look at DSNAs, data structures and algorithms, as just something that you just learn for the interview, then put away. But also, you need it for the interview. So you need it to get the job. So like I said, do your data structures and algorithms and practice your problems. Go on HackerRank, go on LeetCode, do a problem a day while you're job searching, or maybe 2 or 3 problems a day while you're job searching. I think it's crucial personally. So step 1, learn your language, be proficient in it. Step 2, learn your data structures and algorithms. Step 3, decide, what am I interested in? So the lowest barrier of entry in the industry is probably web development. So I want to do web development and become a generalist, become a full stack generalist first. And then, some odd years into my career, I can then decide what I want to specialize in once I've seen a little bit of everything, right? I think that's where I'm at in my career right now. But yeah, so if you decide that you're interested in now the web stuff, pick up a framework. If you're learning Python, pick up Django or pick up Flask. If you want something lighter weight, Ruby, pick up Ruby on Rails or Sinatra, I think it's called. If you're learning JavaScript, there's a lot you can choose for the back end. There's a lot you can choose on the front end. But pick something popular. I mean, Mern is usually Express for the back end is usually quite popular of a choice. You can use vanilla React if you want to do the React route. You can pick up Next.js or something like, what was it called? Astro, if you want something a bit more bleeding edge. But yeah, you have a lot of choices. But essentially, one thing to keep in mind when you're learning these frameworks is I would be very hesitant personally, I would be very hesitant about picking up React unless I already had a solid grasp of the JavaScript fundamentals. Some people, I think, skip that step a little bit, and they are kind of paralyzed without React, and they only understand the web browser in terms of React, when the more fundamental thing is the document object model, the DOM, right? So understand your basics before you jump into these frameworks, and always take a step back to, I guess, learn the magic behind the tools. So understand how an HTTP requests work. Don't just rely on Express or Axios, Express on the back end and Axios on the front end, to do all that stuff for you magically. There will be times where an understanding, for example, of HTTP is going to be incredibly crucial to accomplishing the goal of, let's say, downloading that PDF from your server efficiently or something like that. So yeah, like I said earlier, I don't think it's a matter of balance so much as there's a strict order of operations I think people should follow. But I think once you get to the framework stage, the only thing you really got to balance is building and learning at the same time. You always have to be learning, not just the framework, the fundamentals. You should still be solving problems every single day. When I was building my first web application in Django, um, I was building that web application at night, but during the day, I was doing 1 or 2 HackerRank problems to keep my problem solving sharp because I'm like, I haven't gotten the job yet. And once I get interviewed, I'll need to solve problems. So I need to keep that sharp. So I
So
guess
you're
that's what I
referring
would
to working
balance.
on you're referring to working on projects with your whatever native framework you've chosen
Mhm.
versus drilling down into DSAs and or yeah, and really understanding the fundamentals of the underlying coding language that backs that framework. Is that correct? Is that kind of what you're just referring to?
Yes. So for the framework itself, make sure you have a strong grasp of the programming language itself before you dig into the framework.
Right.
And once you dig into the framework, take a step back every now and then to demystify the magic of the framework and understand what the framework is giving you, um, in terms of like what exactly are they automating that makes your life a lot easier. And on the other side of it, while you are building, and if you haven't gotten your job yet, while you are building, you always have to kind of have a finger on learning the computer science fundamentals, studying a bit of data structures and algorithms every single day, and solving 1 or 2 problems on HackerRank. Again, leading up to the interview. Once you've gotten your job, of course, like your world's gonna change, and this advice won't apply as um in such a straightforward way. But that's a conversation for later.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, going back to the essentially the beginning of what you just said, I think that you mentioned people kind of downplaying the effectiveness of learning DSA. And I think that that kind of plays into the narrative that you can become a software engineer in 3 months or 6 months. Because like the role that you're applying for, the junior role that you're applying for, somebody who's brand new to the industry, may not involve a lot of, implementation of complex algorithms on a day-to-day basis. But I feel like pretending like it's not important to learn these things up front can kind of cheapen the lifetime value of your career as a whole. Um, because I mean, these algorithms exist for a reason. There are sophisticated problems uh, that need sophisticated solutions, and I don't know. That's kind of a psychological thing for people kind of learning. But I mean, whether or not it's relevant to your first position, it certainly, in my estimation, can't hurt to get some exposure to it if you want to make anything of your career over the long term.
Yeah, I mean, there's a multifaceted, I guess, answer to this general problem, which is to data structures and algorithms or to not data structures and algorithms. Yes, it's
Right.
true. You won't be implementing your own sort algorithm. You won't be implementing bubble sort or binary search on your own on the job. Of course, most of what you learn during your data structures and algorithms won't be implementing and doing those things manually yourself. You'll either reach for a library or something or the other.
Right.
But the important thing here is just training your brain to approach problems and solve problems. You're a problem solver. And yes, you can get very far in your career having touched none of that stuff and just being very, I guess, um, proficient with, let's say, React. And you're a very proficient front end developer and you've hardly used any of these things that you learned in computer science, or maybe you just skipped that part altogether. Um, but what's relevant now is the climate, right? The climate that we live in right now is one in which it's very difficult for juniors to get jobs. You could, like I said, you could have gotten away with all that stuff during the golden age of boot camps, right? When
Right.
there was just a lot, when we were in a low interest rate economy, all these VCs were cutting every, kid coming out of computer science class a check to start that next tech companies. There were jobs everywhere. People just needed talent or engineers to build stuff and build stuff fast. And they didn't care about the most rigorous, software. Just check out these React components. Here's the design. Build me this thing as fast as you can, right? We are no longer in that age right now, right? Given the high interest rate economy, given that tech is hurting, it's hyper competitive, and the only way I think any junior can stand out from the next junior is to show that they're a better problem solver than the next person. No junior is going to have that deep expertise in that MERN stack as no junior is going to have a deep understanding of any of these things. This takes experience. You got to work on real production systems to get a deep understanding of any piece of technology. So the only way I think you can really set yourself apart is to show that you can solve problems. But that's, of course, more so at the interview stage. Getting the interview is something else that we can talk about. But yeah, the only way juniors, I think, can stand out from the next junior is to show that they're a more capable problem solver than the next. And data structures and algorithms are invaluable in that respect.
Absolutely. Well, great transition. Speaking of, getting that interview, especially when it comes to that first position, I wanted to show you something here. I'm sharing a window right now. Can you see it okay?
Yeah.
So this is a Reddit post that I came across a couple of days ago. It's very dramatically titled, "It's nearly impossible to get a job right now." And it outlines this job post for a junior front end developer that was posted, at the time of this screenshot, less than a day after the this is less than a day after the job was posted, and there's almost 2,300 applicants on that particular job. So my question about this particular screenshot is, how would you advise somebody go after their first position, generally in the market that we're currently in, and then whether or not you would advise anybody in general to apply to a job like this that has that many applicants?
You have nothing to lose by applying. Just time, maybe like some emotional investment that goes with it. But yeah, so the thing that's a little special about that role in particular is that they are openly advertising that it's for juniors. But by and large, I think most people that I know who get their first junior role, they didn't apply to a role that said junior. They just saw a job listing for engineer and they just applied on a whim. And they do that hundreds of times until a company decides to give them a chance. A lot of companies are open to hiring juniors. They're just not open about it. That's not their priority. And if you put yourself in the shoes of a business owner who's running a tech company, of course, like you're not going to, generally speaking, you're more interested in people who can just help propel your business. You're not so much interested in, I guess, mentoring and all this stuff.
Right.
But you are open to it. And so juniors, I think, are more it's more beneficial for them, I think, to go through, I guess, less traditional routes. So what I mean by that is, yeah, if you see these job postings, definitely apply. Send your cover letter and your resume to the recruiter directly on LinkedIn if you have to. If you see a job that says 3+ years of experience, you should just apply. You got nothing to lose. Some company eventually is going to give you a chance if you sufficiently stand out. And we can talk about strategies to make you stand out on paper. But I think that's really the hardest part. Standing out on paper. If you're a junior who is very, I guess, disciplined in their problem solving and doing their leak code or HackerRank or whatever, and who is capable of building things with their weapons of choice, for example, MERN, then you got nothing to worry about, I think, once you get the interview. Unless, of course, you have some soft skill issues. I know some people with Asperger's who, I guess, need coaching and need work in those areas, but technically they're brilliant. That's a whole different set of problems that they have to go through. But generally speaking, I guess for most people, yeah, it's just you shouldn't look at that and let it deter you, because ultimately you only have one option. And your only option at this point is to move forward and keep applying. You've already started the journey. Looking at these things and freaking out over it isn't going to do you any good. I always tell folks that if you're passionate about development and you know that this is what you really want to do, then it's just a matter of when and not if. You just got to keep moving forward and keep applying, and applying smartly, of course, which is what we can talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I'm at the end of my list of questions here that I had for you. So I would love to hear what kind of what your notes are on applying smartly. Like, I mean, assuming that you're going to take a step and apply to, for example, this job that has thousands of applicants already, um, how can you narrow that down to be, you know, in terms of uniqueness or impact of your application? How can you be one out of 100 instead of one of 2,300, or one out of 10 instead of one out of 2,300? Because making that higher impact inquiry into something like this is, in my estimate, I mean, developing an approach that has higher impact in that way will obviously greatly increase your chances of landing that position over the mid
Yeah.
to long term.
So, two things. Well, maybe more than two. I don't know. Um, I'll just say, okay, let me start by saying this. Consider the average applicant. Consider the average bootcamp applicant's resume. What are they going to have on there? They're going to have their bootcamp projects. They're going to talk about all the different technologies that they touch for a few hours to build out certain features. They're going to have MERN, or they're going to have MERP if you use Postgres or something. They're going to have I guess Python and JavaScript and Ruby on Rails with Express, and it's a hodgepodge of technologies that they have on there, just like a broad set of web technologies
Right.
that all pretty much do the same thing. If you have, for example, Ruby on Rails and MERN on there, it's a little questionable. If I were a Ruby on Rails developer looking at this application, I would just think to myself, I don't think I really know Ruby on Rails that deeply. I think they touched it briefly, but they also know MERN. So it's but they might have an understanding of just general web concepts and what it means to build like an endpoint and have some front end client reach into it to grab data. But, if I decide to interview this person, again, what speaks most loudly is their problem solving capabilities. But that's besides the point. The question is, how do we stand out on paper? So considering that the average applicant from bootcamp has those things, I think the way you make your resume stand out is to have a passion project of your own. For to have a passion project of your own that you built yourself without boot camp input. But I understand that not everyone has that. Not everyone has the luxury of being able to dedicate their time to a side project, because they're either a parent or they have an ongoing full-time job that they're working at while thinking about how to transition. So if you can't get that passion project out, then unfortunately your resume is going to just look like an average bootcamp resume. But that's not the end of the story. I think the next thing you can do, if that is if the situation, or if it isn't your situation, I think the cover letter is the next thing. So I personally have gotten a lot of luck with my cover letters. I think recruiters in particular really value cover letters. And I know a lot of recruiters who will throw a resume into the bin if it doesn't come with a cover letter. So here's where it gets a little tricky. Ideally, your cover letter should be personalized to every single company that you apply to, but no one has time to write a cover letter for those 500 companies that you probably might apply to. At least, I'm taking the nightmare scenario. This isn't reality for a lot of people. It doesn't have to be 500. We can narrow it down to how can you apply to 50 companies and be sure that a few of them give you a chance and at least interview you. So forget that whole nonsense about people applying to 500 companies. They're applying to 500 companies, in my opinion, because they're doing it wrong, or they just have incredibly bad luck, right? That could be the situation as well. But let's assume that our luck isn't that bad. You want to create a general cover letter, and you want to have, let's say, 2 sentences in the intro and 2 sentences in the conclusion that you can swap out for every single company, right? If this company existed before 2021, just go on ChatGPT and ask them for an overview about what that company does. And then you can personalize those 2 sentences in the intro, 2 sentences in the conclusion to talk about the company's mission and why your background makes you a good fit, why that background makes you a potentially strong asset to that team. So this is for the general company. This is for the companies that, you're just applying to on a whim. Now, let's say there's a company that you actually think is really cool, and you think you have a solid chance of working for them because they have a small engineering team, they're this brand new startup, but they're working on something really cool and you really want to work for them, those are the companies you should actually make a pretty solid cover letter for. And you can approach this smartly. You can manage your time well. You can say, for example, so here's let's pretend that I'm someone who is currently unemployed. I just got done with a boot camp, and now I am currently in the application. I'm in the zone in terms of applying to companies and finding a job. I'm going to treat applying and learning like it's a full-time job. I'll spend half of my day doing leak code or studying data structures and algorithms, or maybe a quarter of my day. I'm just kind of giving you guys a template. The other 3/4 or the other half of the day, I will spend applying to companies. I have my template cover letter ready to go. I have my resume, which I had other people look at. That's ready to go. I'll just look for all these companies across all these different websites, and I will send, let's say, 10 applications out a day. Let's say, or sorry, that's kind of a lot, especially if you're editing these sentences and talking to ChatGPT. Let's say 5 companies. 4 of those companies will be just the general, I'm just switching out a few sentences here and there on my cover letter. One of those companies will be a company that I really kind of give a shit about, and I will write a personalized cover letter for. And you're not just applying, you're not just sending these through the levers website that they use or their job applications website. You're also going to be sending this to the LinkedIn recruiters. So look on LinkedIn to see if they're recruiters. Send those to them directly. Email the founders if you need to, right? Be a little unorthodox. Your application won't get caught if you they're likely not to get caught, or they're likely to end up on the back of that 3,000 line queue if you submit it through traditional means. So, if you have to pay for that LinkedIn premium so that you can send these things to recruiters without having to connect with them, you should do it. I've had a lot of luck personally doing that myself. And I've gotten recruiters telling me straight up, thank you for appreciating the art of the cover letter. This is a solid cover letter. We're moving you through for positions that I'm not qualified for as well. So, that, in my opinion, is how you should stand out insofar as how do I differentiate myself from everyone else on paper. And just to summarize, because that was a lot. Step one, if you have a passion project, if you can find the time to work on a passion project, that will make your resume look that much better, because these things aren't sourced from boot camps. And when people ask you about it, when the recruiter asks you about these projects, you will have one project in which you can say, this was not homework. I built this myself because there was a problem that I really cared about. And there it is. It's on GitHub. Feel free to send it to your senior engineers or whatever engineers interested. And on the front of the cover letter, I just told you guys, the cover letter, in my opinion, really does matter as a junior, because again, all you can really do as a junior to land that interview is try your best to stand out amongst the rest on paper. Yeah, unfortunately, it's a papers game in terms of landing the interview. And once you land that interview, well, great. You know your data structures and algorithms. You did all your leak code. You're probably going to do really well. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that was great. I mean, the overarching thing that I just heard from you is don't fall in line, essentially. So you're looking at a job with, however many hundreds or thousands of applicants. That's a lot of people that clicked LinkedIn, easy apply, and then fell directly in the stack of other people who did the exact same thing. And by doing just a couple of things that are a little bit different and don't require, I mean, a passion project is going to require a lot of effort over an extended period of time, but like things like taking several minutes to change a cover letter for each job, and then balancing kind of the spray and pray approach versus like being more of a sniper when it comes to, I like the combination of those
Exactly.
two, because everyone's talking about one or the other, and obviously you can strike a balance by doing both, and just in general master the art of job prospecting by going through both of those things. And I mean, that's certainly what I can attribute to me landing my first junior position. Is it was like more of a calculated approach, and I sent my cover letter to the recruiter specifically, and I made a point to send a loom to everybody every step along the way as well. So every time I met with somebody, I sent them something like this, like talking to them, saying thank you, reiterating things we had talked about over the course of our meeting, why I'm interested in working at this company and how I think I could be a solid fit. And I hear again and again, even, several months after starting that position, um, that was a big deal. Like just them seeing my face and hearing my voice in that way, um, made me, one of one essentially, regardless of how many people were applying. So,
Sorry, on the note of passion projects, side projects, one thing that I always personally appreciate, at the very least, it doesn't have to be a passion project, but having a portfolio website is always good. A portfolio website that has your projects. It could even be from the boot camp, but also maybe having an introductory video embedded in your portfolio as well. I think
yeah,
that might be pretty great, because then people can also kind of assess just really quick from your video the type of person you are, if you're a culture fit, things like that. Things that you're providing recruiters essentially with an extra signal. And that's ultimately what you want to do, is provide them with as many signals as you can. Traditionally, you only can do that through paper. But if you have a portfolio website, which has maybe an embedded video talking about where you are talking to the camera and telling people a little bit about your journey, that could be very beneficial. So ultimately, the moral of this story is, consider the average. How can you provide signals that the average isn't providing to the recruiter or to the engineers who are looking at your application if it's a smaller company? And but you're right in your analogy. I think there's a general understanding that people who are applying for junior positions in this day and age have to do the spray and pray approach, where you send up 500 applications and you're just winning on the sheer statistic that someone out of 1,000 is going to look at your resume. But um, you definitely can combine a sniper-like approach with the spray and pray. You kind of have to do both, because doing the sniper approach is very, I guess, inefficient, but it generally does provide, I guess, more for yourself to stand out. So
right.
combining the two is definitely, I guess, you said it perfectly, the way to go.
Benjamin, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me again. I really appreciate it. You've given me hope. So
Like I
that's
said, man, when, not if. You
yeah,
got this.
absolutely. Cool, man. Well, I'm sure we'll talk again soon. So thank you again.
Yeah, of course. Good luck, man.